Okay, so if you're anything like me, you went through your Sarah J Maas phase a few years ago, you really loved it, you had so much fun, and now you look back on those books and you're like, why did I like this as much? Okay, before we get started, this is not an attack on the Sarah J Maas fans or the readers who just really enjoy her books. You guys are valid in your opinions. This video is for the girlies who have read Sarah J Maas in the past, maybe a few years ago, maybe a few months ago, really enjoyed them, but are now looking back and thinking, this isn't quite what I thought my reading taste was, and now you're realizing that your reading taste is something different, and you're looking for book recommendations to go along with that change in taste. Don't get me wrong, Sarah J Maas books are kind of like crack. You start reading them and then you just can't get yourself to stop, but then there's always that come down after the rush where you're like, did I really like that? Did this really add to my life? Anyways, if you're new here, I'm Jananie and this is my channel, This Story Ain't Over, where I talk about books and give you my unsolicited opinions on them. Now I should probably also mention my history with Sarah J Maas. So I read the Throne of Glass series, I think in high school, in like my last couple years of high school. I really loved that series up until the third book, and then when we got the fourth book, I was kind of really disappointed. I was like so psyched for it to come out. I went and got a signed copy the first day it was out, and I was just so disappointed by that book, and I think at that point I was like growing out of the series. And then when Empire of Storm, I think that's what it's called, came out, I bought the book, but then I never really felt the motivation to actually read it and finish it because I felt like the way that the story and series was going was just not where I wanted it to be. Now when it comes to the ACOTAR series, I actually read that as each book was coming out while I was in university. I really enjoyed them just because I was in that like new adult age and phase in my life. It was one of the first traditionally published books that I had read that had like more smutty scenes. I obviously had read a bunch of that on fan fiction online in previous years, but this was the first time I was getting it in like an actual book. And honestly, I just really liked the idea of like the Beauty and the Beast-ish retelling and just the vibe and the way that we were learning more about the world and how like the relationships change in a way that I actually appreciated. And overall, I was just having a lot of fun with those first two books. Now, when the third book came out, I definitely was really disappointed with the way it ended and just like the way things were going with a lot of the side characters. I felt like everyone was just so hetero and getting matched up with mates for no reason. And then when A Court of Frost and Starlight, I think, the little novella that came in between the first and second half of the series, when that came out, I was just so disappointed because in my opinion, like that was such a filler book and it felt so unnecessary to me. And that was, I think, the nail in the coffin for me not wanting to read any more Sarah J Maas books. So again, as I said, I totally understand those of you who really love the Sarah J Maas books, you find them really entertaining or you really like certain aspects of them, but I do think there's so many elements of those books that you can find in other books that you may enjoy even more that have maybe a little bit more substance to them. I'm not saying that you need to always read books with substance in them, but I'm just saying if you wanted to ever diversify your palette, also get some more authors of color in your palette, then maybe stick around for these recommendations. I'm not here to shame you. I just think it's so amazing that so many people have gotten back into reading because of Sarah J Maas books, and so now I want to keep you reading with other books. For this video, I have over 25 book recs from various genres to help those of you who are Sarah J Maas reformed readers. I've got fantasy books, I've got romantasy, I've got retellings, I've got romance books, historical romance. There's a whole variety and it just really depends on the person you are, but I do feel like all of these books hit one note at least from the Sarah J Maas universe, whether it's like the smut or it's the fantasy world or if it's the suspense or the drama. There's something here for everyone. Now, full disclosure, this video idea came from a video that Hannah from A Clockwork Reader put up recently. She was giving overly specific book recommendations and one person on Instagram had asked her for book recs for someone who's a reformed Sarah J Maas reader. So that's where I got the idea for this video because I was like, oh my god, I know there's so many people out there who are reformed Sarah J Maas readers who are looking for book recs, so I thought let's make a whole video out of it. Now without further ado, let's jump into the books. First up, I have a bunch of fantasies, and one of the books that Hannah herself recommended for these reformed Sarah J Maas readers was the Ember and the Ash series. She did a really great job of describing this, so I'll let you go check out her video. But essentially, for those of you who are Throne of Glass Sarah J Maas fans who really love that series, I think you're gonna love the Ember and the Ashes series. In my opinion, it's way better, and it's also got a lot of elements that the Throne of Glass series has as well. It has characters who go through different arcs and relationships that change over the course of the series, and overall just some really badass and amazing main characters. This is a 4-book series, and the amount of tears I have shed over this series is just insane. I loved every moment of it, and I cared so much for these characters, and I think that if you are someone who got really invested with the characters in the Throne of Glass series, then you'll have no problem getting invested in these characters. Now, on a similar note, I have Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lin Tan. This is a duology, I believe. I have read the second book, but this first book is actually quite stunning and quite amazing. Like the Throne of Glass series, it sort of follows a strong female main character, and she's a daughter of the Moon Goddess, and she is forced to take on these different quests and find her place in this celestial kingdom. This book also reminds me a little bit of ACOTAR in the sense that in this book, the main character goes through these like different trials to sort of secure her place in this fantasy world, and that reminded me a little bit of the trials that Feyre goes through at the end of ACOTAR. This series also has a bit of a love triangle, which might be fun for those of you who liked that aspect in either of Sarah J. Maas's series. And overall, this is like a really nice fantasy with a lot of romance and some really stunning mythology. Alright, these next two fantasies are also ones that have a really strong female main character that kind of feels reminiscent of Selena, especially the main character in Iron Widow by Sharon J. Zhao. I really like the main character, and she has a lot of drive to her, which I think is sort of similar to Selena's in the Throne of Glass series. This is sort of a feminist rage sci-fi fantasy YA book that will definitely leave you, on the edge of your seat wanting to know what happens next. There's so many twists and turns to this book, and the main character is definitely super unhinged, which I feel like Selena is at different parts in the series. So I feel like if you enjoyed those aspects and the twists and turns, you'll probably really enjoy this. Alright, and then the next series that I have is the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang. I don't have the first book with me, so I'm holding up the second book, The Dragon Republic. It's a 3-book series. It's absolutely fantastic. I think the one thing you need to remember is to look up trigger warnings for this series, because it does involve some really graphic scenes in some cases that are actually based off of real history, so it's nothing so crazy, but I would just look up triggers. Now, the reason I'm recommending this is because if you really loved the Throne of Glass series for the way that we follow Selena through, a lot of parts of her life and the way that she changes over the course of the series, then I think you'll really like this series, because our main character, Rin, goes through a lot of changes throughout the book and has a really nice character arc. This series also has a lot of similar themes to the Throne of Glass series, this idea of questioning your identity and having magical powers and trying to find your rightful place in the world. But it also has a lot of the other fantasy elements and sort of political elements as well. There's so many characters in this book that I absolutely loved, but who are also very complex and really, really interesting for that reason. There's so many people who die along the way, which is also very upsetting, but also makes for a really entertaining read. And overall, I feel like if you can get into the Poppy War and stick with it, you're really gonna love it, and you're gonna be addicted by the end. Now, if you enjoyed some of the mysterious elements of the Throne of Glass series and even the ACOTAR series, then you might enjoy these next 3 fantasy-ish books. These ones are slightly set in the real world / historical world, so they're a little bit different from the high fantasy that you're used to in the Sarah J. Maas books. But all of these involve really strong main characters, some really interesting mysteries where you're just trying to figure out what's gonna happen. And I do feel like Sarah J. Maas has a way of just keeping you on the hook, waiting for the reveals, so I feel like these books will also give you that feeling. So the first of those 3 is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Again, this has a really strong presence for the main character. This basically follows our main character, Alex Stern, who has been able to see ghosts for her entire life, and it's really affected her life in negative ways. And then she gets this crazy offer to go to Yale and become a student there if she will help sort of keep the secret societies from overusing their magic in bad ways. So she is the 9th house of these secret societies at Yale, and she has sort of a will they won't they romance going on with another member of the 9th house. And framing this entire story is a murder mystery that is sort of set up at the beginning of the book, where a local girl in town has been killed, and they're trying to figure out what happened with her and if it has anything to do with the secret societies, because there's something fishy about her death. If you enjoy Sarah J Maas books, I feel like you'll enjoy strength and independence of Alex's character in this series and how she's just forging on her own, the way that Selena does often in the Throne of Glass series and even Feyre in the ACOTAR series. So yeah, I feel like this one is definitely going to give you those same vibes. This next book you may or may not enjoy if you're a Sarah J Maas fan, but I do feel like it has that extra mystery element. It's got a bit of a forbidden romance and it's just overall fun and something different. So that book is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is basically a Romeo and Juliet inspired story set in 1926 in Shanghai, and our two main characters are basically the heirs of these two rival gangs in Shanghai. One is a Chinese gang and one is a Russian gang. And what's fun about this book is just like that sort of tension between the characters and the romance there, but also the overall mystery that's going on throughout the book, which I feel like is a bit similar to some of the mystery in the first few Throne of Glass books. Alright, and then the last fantasy that I have is The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. This one I feel like you'll enjoy if you enjoyed the ACOTAR series and sort of the changing romantic interests and just not knowing who's going to end up with who, because this book is a large cast of characters, about 6 people, and they all have magical powers, and they're basically competing to become the new curator of this magical library of Alexandria that has this like wealth of magical knowledge. So we get different characters from different walks of life who are sort of vying for this position. And I think what's fun about this book is like the lies and secrets and betrayal and sort of the romantic entanglements between the characters. This one definitely has a little bit more spiciness to it than some of the other fantasies I was talking about, so that might also be a treat. The one warning I would give about this book though is that it is a bit on the slower side as you stick with each of the characters, but it does have some really great complex characters that you'll just be so intrigued by. Alright, next I have 3 books that I would kind of classify as romantasies. They involve some sort of fantasy element or like horror element, but they're also really focused on a romance. So the first one that I have is definitely going to work for those of you who like these spicy, smutty scenes in Sarah J Maas books, and that book is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is essentially a sort of Dracula retelling, but from the perspective of one of his brides, and her name is Constanta, and she's basically writing this like series of letters, or this long letter that is addressed to Dracula, and she's sort of recounting the centuries that she spent with him, their relationship. There's a polyamorous relationship in this book, which is really well done. I think the way that they all care for each other is just like so stunning, and like the just like sexual and romantic tension between all of them was just done really well. So yeah, this is definitely like on the thrilling, seductive side. So I think if you are really into like the romantic aspects and the like sexy aspects of like the ACOTAR series, you'll probably love this book. Alright, this next book I feel like should work for most Sarah J Maas fans who like the smuttiness, but maybe not. I feel like it's a bit niche. But the book I'm talking about is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This involves a vampire werewolf romance. It's sort of set in our current day, but like in an alternate version, and it involves a marriage of convenience between a vampire and a werewolf. This book has like lots of smutty scenes to it, especially towards the end of the book, and definitely involves some vampire werewolf biology that gets worked into the sex scenes. So I feel like if you've been enjoying fairy sex in the air, you'll probably enjoy this one. Alright, and then the last romantasy book that I have, though I feel like this one is more in the fantasy contemporary side than romance. This is more set in our real world with a fantasy twist to it, and it's definitely more on the PG-13 vibe, but that book is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a pretty lighthearted fantasy romance, I would say. This basically follows our main character Mika Moon, who is a witch, and she gets this like weird job offer to come to this strange home and teach these 3 young girls magic. This book has a bit of a mystery to it and a really sweet romance to it as well, and I think if you are looking for something a little lighter than some of the Sarah J Maas books, you might really enjoy this one. Alright, next I have 3 retellings that I feel like you'll probably really enjoy if you enjoy Sarah J Maas books, because each of these is pretty gut-wrenching and has like so much epicness to it, I feel like. And if you enjoy the aspect of like ACOTAR being a little bit of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, then you might enjoy these retellings as well. So funnily enough, these are all mythology retellings, and the first one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book will honestly just take your heartstrings, rip them out, and leave you crying by the end. But I think it's worth it for this book because it's such a beautiful love story. And I do feel like the love story is the main focus of this book, even though it is a bit of a retelling of the Iliad and like the story of Achilles. This is a queer gay romance as well, and it's just so beautifully done, and it's just such a stunning portrayal of these mythological characters. So I feel like if you really want some like deep emotional romance, then this is definitely one to pick up. The next book that I have is also by Madeline Miller, and that's Circe. I feel like this one is a bit more on the slower side, so just keep that in mind if you're going into it. But I feel like if you enjoy the aspect of the strong, independent main characters in Sarah J. Maas's books, and if you wanted a book with someone who's not fully a good guy and is a bit of an anti-hero, then you'll probably really enjoy this book. This follows Circe, who is a bit of a witch in Greek mythology. In the Odyssey, she lives on this island where she's been banished, and she charms men into coming to her island and spending some time there, and then she turns them into pigs. At least that's how the mythology goes. But in this book, we sort of get her side of the story and start to understand her a lot more. On a very similar note, I have Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This is a retelling of the Hindu epic, the Ramayana, and it basically follows a very minor character from the Ramayana, which is Kaikeyi. She is sort of the evil stepmother-ish character. She's portrayed in very different ways. In some versions, she is just like corrupted by her like maid, and in some versions, she's the evil one herself and commits this awful act that sort of hinders our hero of the epic. But in this book, we sort of get this like feminist retelling of the epic, and we get the story from Kaikeyi's perspective, and we sort of humanize her. She's not a perfect character. She's definitely an anti-hero as well, but this book is such a wonderful and stunning portrait of a strong, independent woman who is just trying to make the most of the world and help other women along the way. This has some magic to it. It has some other mythological characters, and it's just overall a really fun time. And I think following Kaikeyi from when she's a child into her adulthood and on is just so interesting, especially as relationships change and friendships change along the way, and like the politics of court get involved as well. It's just overall really fun. All right, and then finally I have some historical romances and then just some regular romances that I think you'll probably really enjoy if you enjoy Sarah J. Maas books. These obviously don't have the fantasy element of Sarah J. Maas books, but they do have those really strong romances, some excellent smutty, spicy scenes, and are overall just as fun and entertaining, while some of them have some extra additional themes that I think make them really well-rounded. So in terms of historical romance, I have Diana Quincy's novels. She's a fantastic romance writer. She's also Palestinian American, and these books are so good. These are like historical Regency-esque romances. This one's a little bit later in history, but this one's definitely Regency romance. And they honestly just follow these really strong, independent Arab female main characters who are doing their own thing, but then falling in love with these like very sexy dukes or other titled Englishmen. And the smutty scenes in these books are fantastic, but the romance in them is also just really fun and exciting. So I think if you're looking for more romancy, smutty books, these are the ones to pick up. All right, next I have two sets of books by two different authors that have authored multiple very wonderful romances. So obviously I have Emily Henry's books, Beach Read, Book Lovers. She's also got like two other books, but these are probably my favorites of her books so far. The thing I love about Emily Henry's books is that like they definitely are more well-rounded romances, so you get some more substance to them and a little bit more to the characters beyond the romance, but you also still see these characters come together in a really wonderful and attractive way, I would say. They're very fast and easy reads, and they are just such an entertaining time. And these are the perfect kind of books if you are looking for a romance but don't want to get into anything super deep or thick or that's going to take too much time. I feel like if you are a Sarah J. Maas reader and just want like the romance in a quick fix, then these are probably really great ones to pick up. Emily Henry's books also have some pretty nice spicy scenes to them. I wouldn't say they're very explicit, but they are fairly explicit, so you do get a little bit of that. All right, and then I have the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert. I absolutely love Talia Hibbert, and she is a wonderful romance writer. She also has a lot of like self-published books that you can check out, but this is her very famous Brown Sisters trilogy, which follows a different sister in the family in each book, and each of them is very different in their own right and is dealing with different, you know, issues and problems and things in their lives. But the love interests in each of these is just so freaking fantastic, and just the way that these characters fall in love is just so compelling and so entertaining. And these smutty scenes in these books let me tell you, are fantastic. They're definitely more on the explicit side, but they're just so fun. And I honestly think if you're just looking for something with some spicy scenes, these are definitely ones to pick up. One thing I also love about these books is just like the representation that we get. All the main characters are Black women. And then in Get a Life, Chloe Brown, there is chronic illness representation. And in Act Your Age, Eve Brown, we have some autism rep as well. All right, and then the final two romances that I also have are second chance romances that I think are so fantastic. And I honestly think they will just like tug at your heartstrings because I was just like sobbing by the end for both of these. So one of those is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan in general has like a lot of other romance books as well, and she's a wonderful romance writer. I've been meaning to pick up more of her stuff soon, so I will be doing that soon. But this is one of her books that I've actually read and I absolutely loved it. It follows a divorced couple who still co-parent their children and are starting to find themselves in a bit of a more healing place than they were previously in their relationship, and they're starting to see that they might be able to sort of rekindle their romance again. But it obviously comes with a lot of baggage and, you know, a complicated situation. But this book was just so beautiful and wonderfully done. It is a bit more on the heavier side. It's got some heavy topics. I would definitely search up trigger warnings, content warnings. But I think the thing that you will love if you're a Sarah J Maas fan is the sexual tension between these two characters. Like, it is off the charts. It is way beyond the chart. Just had my like toes curling the entire time. It was so good. On a similar note, 7 Days in June by Tia Williams also has some really incredible sexual tension. Like, I loved it so much. This book also features a second chance romance and involves these two characters who fell in love with each other over 7 Days in June many years ago, and then were ripped apart for reasons beyond themselves, and they never got into contact again until now, when they're both writers and they have been sort of writing to each other through their books over these past several years, and they're meeting again in June for 7 days because of this like writers conference, I think, and they're sort of like reminiscing and getting to know each other again, and it's just such a beautiful romance. This again has some other heavier topics to it, but I think the overall romance was just so fantastic, and you'll just fall in love with each of these characters on their own as well. I think they were such strong characters themselves, and so when they come together, you're just like, oh my god, I want you guys to be together so much. Alrighty, and with that said, those are all of the books that I want to recommend to my reformed Sarah J Maas readers. Again, no shade to those of you who love Sarah J Maas books. This is really more of a recommendation video for those of you who have read Sarah J Maas before and just need something to read next. I absolutely love all of the books on this video, and they are honestly tried and true recommendations that I have given to so many people, and as someone who was a Sarah J Maas girly in the past, I think these are just such great books to start off with to get your feet soaked in different genres and in different types of books. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some new book recommendations to pick up soon. And as always, I would love it if you guys would check out my Instagram, Goodreads, TikTok, and Bindery community down below. If you're intrigued by the books I recommended today, if you feel like your taste is similar to mine, then you'll probably really want to join my Bindery community. You can get extra exclusive content from me, from monthly TBRs to journal entries every week, Zoom hangouts, and also a behind the scenes on the publishing journey with my publishing imprint, Boundless Press. I'm very close to offering on a manuscript soon, so you'll definitely want to join to see the behind the scenes and the journey up until now before I offer on a book for our imprint. Anyways, I will see you guys in my next video, and please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!